Hi guys, this is Krista from Mosaic Party and Event Design and Blooms by Mosaic. Today I wanted to show you how to make these coffee filter leaves. These are relatively easy to make and don't require a lot of fancy supplies. They're fantastic for popping into arrangements and bouquets, or you can stem a bunch of them together to make a garland. So let's get started. To make these, you will need cone coffee filters. This is a size number 4, I believe, for an 8 to 12 cup coffee maker. You can use the size 2, which are much smaller, but you'll get a smaller leaf. You will need scissors. You will need some tacky glue, or even school glue works in this case. You will need some thin gauged wire. This is 26 gauge. You can use a 24, but I like the 26, the bow tying wires from Craft Decor. I get these from a local dollar store. You will need brown floral tape. You can use green if you don't have brown, but the brown gives a little more lifelike quality to the stem. You will also need food coloring. Today I'm working with a Wilton brand. As long as it's a gel food coloring, you'll find that works the easiest. This is a juniper green. I'm also going to add a little bit of copper into my coloring. You can use reds or browns or yellows, whatever you fancy, and that'll all make sense when we get to the coloring. You will also need a craft paintbrush and a foam brush. So I think that's everything that we'll need. We're going to start by cutting our leaf shape. And I'm going to show you this in steps. Some of the steps I've pre-done just to make the video a little bit smoother running. There's a lot of drying time involved when making these in between steps, so I have some pre-done ones along the way. First and foremost, we're going to take a coffee filter. You're going to get 2 leaves. So 2 leaves out of 1 coffee filter. You're going to fold the coffee filter in half, but we're going to keep in mind that you don't need this seam. You can cut it off now or just fold before it. Like that. And then you're going to fold in half again. Now, I work with just a general leaf shape. If you're looking to replicate a specific variety of leaf, you'll want to look up templates for that. Some leaves are rounder, some are more narrow. This one's just a general leaf. And you're just going to cut it out. Doesn't matter if you keep a little bit of that seam on the bottom. That won't matter in the end because that's where we're going to be attaching our wire. So we have 2 leaf shapes, but because we folded the coffee filter the way we did, we actually have 4 petals in total. You're going to need 2 petals per leaf, a front and a back. We are going to use just a scrap piece of wax paper to protect my surface. It's a reused piece from projects I was doing earlier. I try not to waste too much if I can reuse and wipe down things. So we need to work on coloring these. I keep little dishes or little bowls handy for doing my coloring. I'm going to need two, one for green, one for copper. And then I find little coffee stir sticks. I also get these at the dollar store. Very inexpensive. I think you get a pack of 100 or might be even 500 in the pack for only $1 or $2. And I find that these are the best way to work with my food coloring. So as we get going with the green, I'm going to probably reiterate a couple of times that when the green dries on coffee filter paper, it tends to dry very light. So we need to go darker with the green and quite more concentrated. And then just a little bit of copper. The copper is only meant for adding a little bit of color variation to the leaves. Like in here, and just sort of throughout the leaf and the petal. I guess leaf, not petal. It's just to give a little highlighting to it, make it a little more realistic. I have a little dish of water I keep handy because you're going to need to activate this with some water. I try not to pour water directly in because then I won't, it'll take a long time to mix it consistently. If you pour water directly in, unless the water is a little bit warmer, you'll still have clumps of the gel food coloring in there. So I tend to just drop a little bit of water in at a time. So that's our copper. Now with the green, I'm actually going to use one of my foam brushes here, just because it holds a little more water. And you want to mix that up. I'm not going to waste all that that's in there, so we're going to use, in the brush I mean. So we're going to use that. Don't worry if you have little messes and spills, you can actually just pick that up with your coffee filter. And all we're going to do is paint this onto our coffee filters. It looks really dark right now. Actually, these are a little bit wet, so there's a lot of color in here. It's a little tip and trick I use. If you have a, I don't know if you can see that, but I can see it's a little too saturated, too much ink. So the only thing about doing this is if you drop it and let go like I did, they tend to get stuck together while they're wet, but that's okay. I don't know if I can pull this apart now. I might have to wait till they're dry. Yeah, I'm gonna have to wait till they're dry. All I would do is I would just leave those aside on wax paper to dry. The reason why I leave them on wax paper is I find I get the most consistent drying on them. They'll take a couple of hours, but I would probably leave them overnight if you could. You can also put them in the microwave. So somebody out there, one of you paper florists gave me that tip. And the thing about the microwave for drying them is you have to really watch it. You can only put it in for about 12-second intervals, as it really affects the food coloring as it dries and tends to blotch it out or burn it. So what I do, if I'm going to pop them in the microwave for a quicker drying, is I actually just break apart a coffee filter. And I don't know why this offers a little bit more of a consistent coloring as it dries in the microwave, but I'll just pop them on here. And unfortunately, you are going to lose and soak out some of the color. So they will dry lighter, and they do anyways, but this will dry them even lighter. Is I would do this, pop this in the microwave for 12 seconds, flip them over, pop them in for another 12 seconds, and then see where we're at. Otherwise, just leave them on the wax paper overnight. And don't worry, I'm not going to waste this. I'm actually going to paint this out and dry it as is so that I can have scraps for later. I almost forgot, we need to put a little copper in this. So all I'm going to do is take a little bit of my coppery color. Like I said earlier, you can use red or browns or mix up your own colors. But all I'm going to do is just paint on a little bit in random places, sort of on the edges and down the middle. Now I don't know if you can see that because the food coloring is so dark right now. But when these dry out, they'll be exactly the perfect variation of natural colors that occur in a leaf as they age and sit in the sun. This one was the double one because I can't get it apart right now, so you just want to flip that over and just add a little bit to the other side. This really won't be affected by having them doubled up at the moment. They'll just take longer to dry is all. Making a mess over there. So we're going to set these aside to dry. You can use gloves because you will have colored hands. It's just a fact of my creative world that I have painted and dyed hands all the time. What you'll end up with is a couple of sets of leaves with a little bit of coppery in them and sort of varied green effect as it dried so that you get a mottled look. So the next step that we do from here is that we're going to glue a wire into these. So I'm going to take a little dish with some glue. All right, make sure I'm in frame here. And you're going to just paint a side, but I'm going to look at my sides. Sometimes you get different coloring on them. And I want my outside of my leaves to be the better coloring. So I'm going to paint an inside. You're just going to cover a leaf in glue right to the edges. Oops. Again, you could be working on a little bit of wax paper or a mat rather than directly on your surface. Luckily, white glue is really easy to clean up. All right, get right down to the bottom if you can. And then you're going to take one of these wires. Now this was the 26 gauge I showed earlier. Very, very pliable, but you want to keep it nice and straight. Press it down the center. Press it into your leaf. And then you're going to cover the top with the other leaf. If you saw my Dusty Miller tutorial, then this is a very similar process. You're going to pop your other leaf on top and smooth it down. You want to make sure that your coffee filters are nice and dry and not even remotely damp at this point, because as you rub, you'll rub the color out of it a little bit. And then it'll be stuck to your surface a little bit, so just pick it up gently. I don't have my handy cloth here with me. I always usually have a cloth handy. And then that's your leaf. Now, something you may want to note is that you may not line them up. I don't know how much that's going to show on the camera, but they're not completely lined up. Don't worry about that because you can come back in. I would suggest doing this a little later when it dries, but you can reshape and cut that edging off so that it does line up. I'm going to press it so that the wire presses out. I'm giving it a really good firm press to pop that wire out to create sort of that stem in the leaf. I'm going to do it on the other side as well. And while it's still a little damp from the glue in between, this is when I'm going to add some of my lines and my grooves into the leaf. So I'm going to take a sharp edge. I happen to have these very sharp pointed scissors. You can use a toothpick or the edge of your scissors. And I'm just going to follow the wire in there. Just sort of highlighting it a little bit. And it should do it on the other side as well, but you can come through gently and do it on the other side. And then I'm just going to make some of my veins and my lines in here. You can get all fancy and draw them, you know, with extra breaks and stuff, but I find just a little texturing goes a long way to make it fairly realistic. And then you can go through and do it on the other side, but I'm going to leave this particular leaf flat on the one side and texture it on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and just build one more since I have the petal right here. Get my glue, load up my brush, cover my leaf. You only need to cover one side. It's a lot of glue. You can thin down the glue a little bit. I wouldn't recommend thinning it out too much, but tacky glue in particular is quite thick. You could also try a glue stick. I don't highly recommend that simply because it doesn't adhere as well for later on. As it tends to dry, it'll break apart. Press in your wire and match the top. Press it down. Press down the edges. Pick it up gently because it is going to stick to your surface a bit. All right, and then I'm going to just, oops, I'm going to use the other scissors because you want a finer point and you want to be careful because it will tear when it's damp from the glue in between. Alright, and we have a couple of leaves. So I'll show you the next step. I'm just going to quickly wipe this up. My handy microfiber cloths that I get from the dollar store. Love these cloths. All right, so you would want to set these aside to dry thoroughly before you go on to the next step. Luckily, I have a couple of pre-made ones, or I have one pre-made one. So this is nice and dry. You can see that I colored this one fairly dark. That's a little too dark for my liking. I do like a little bit of a lighter leaf. That will tend to lighten up still over the next 48 hours because I only did this morning. But it's a little dark because you can't really see the coppering in it. But that's okay for the sake of showing you the tutorial. It will work. So what we want to do is we want to get a nice little glossy coat on this. You can use a spray or a liquid varnish of some sort. But honestly, since I already have glue in my dish, white glue is like Mod Podging. You could also use Mod Podge. If you add a little water to this, it'll go a long way to creating that glossy coat on it. So I'm just going to add a little water to my dish. I'm probably going to add about 1 part of water to 2 parts of glue. And we're just going to mix that up. This is going to dry on the leaf clear. And make sure it's nice and mixed. If you can, I would let this settle a little bit before you applied it, just to get out the air bubbles from mixing. But it won't matter too much. And then you're just going to coat your leaf. And that's going to give it a nice glossy finish. And you're going to coat both sides. I'm lifting it up a little bit so that I'm not pressing off all my shine coat to my table. And just smooth that out a little bit. And like I said, that's going to dry nice and clear. You'll want to make sure that you're working with a foam block or something. I don't have one handy. So I'm going to I have a little glass here that I'm going to stick this in my glass. Until I can go grab a foam block. And that's it. That is all there is to making these leaves. I'm going to just clean that up. Super simple. Super, super simple. You'll just want to come back in after and make sure that you finish it off with some brown floral tape. And all I do to do that is I just pinch the end a little bit, creates a little bit of cupping. Now, if you've ever wrapped really fine wire, you know how tedious this can be, but I actually find doing it while my hands are still slightly sticky from glue much easier. And then you can bend and shape your leaf however you want. This leaf still needs the glossy coat on it, but just to show you how I wrap them together once they are on their stems. I sometimes find with finer wire, starting a little lower, starting to wrap it, and then sliding it up is a good little trick, rather than trying to start up near the base of the leaf and fussing with the edge of the paper. All right. Now I like to fold them and bend them and play with them. These ones are still a little damp from the glue, so this is a good time to do it, because then they'll retain a little bit of wave in their shape, and have a little more texturing. But when I put these together, all I'm going to do, and I usually like to do 2 or 3 leaves, like shown here. There's 3 here and 2 here. I only like to do 2 to 3 leaves per stem, and then that way I have the ability to break them apart as I want into smaller bunches for different projects. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to line them up, and then I'm always going to offset them a little bit. Leaves kind of tend to grow a little more naturally, alternating on sides. Depending on the tree. Some of them are very, very side by side as they go down their stems. And I'm just going to wrap those together. You can start getting a little bit of thickness in it. A little more like a end of a branch. And if you have a funny little bottom to your leaf, just pinch it together while the glue is still a little wet, or just add a little bit of glue on top and pinch it in to finish it up. And there you go. Leaves. Like I said, these ones still need to be glossed, and they'll look like this one done. I hope that was helpful. And now you know how to I make some of my greens. Have a good day. Happy crafting.